for example, who have worked their entire lives and have been, uh, over time, as the economy has changed, left behind. And it creates an interesting perspective because at the same time they're on Medicaid, and for example, I think it's 40%, if not more, of the state budget of Louisiana is funded by federal funds. That is Northeast and California tax dollars. The people who are receiving it resent the government that's providing it to them because they think they have the experience, the direct experience of being pushed out of line, of the benefits that they feel should be coming to them are going to other people. And what we then have are politicians and the media fanning the flames of that resentment and creating an us against them
Yeah,
state of mind.
right.
And of course, us against them, like a football match, not a match, we call it a game, right? A football match would be soccer, what we call soccer, like a football game. And then it drives people to teams and ill-considered decisions and wanting to beat and be in charge or win. The only way to win is to take care of all the people we can take care of. The only way to win is not to put a, whatever it is, $1.5 trillion tax cut package in place for the wealthy, while at the same time we're reconditioning and building new nuclear weapons to threaten other parts of the world.
Oh, well, goodness, that's, yeah.
Well, it's a sad and upsetting circumstance that we find ourselves in. Terribly sad. So to expect this not to affect our children, to expect it not to affect ourselves and our own relationships and our own understanding of our own lives, and to be reduced in some sense to a non-factor. So no matter how much money we make, no matter how important, no matter how fulfilling it seems, the specter of nuclear will erases it. And that's devastating. That's, that's something within our own control, an asteroid, whatever, some other devastation from outside the Earth's atmosphere, say, is not within control. But the same circumstances that have created this nuclear threat has created the huge human effect on climate,
Yeah.
and which is growing in such a way that we control it and we don't understand the variables. Remarkably enough, the Union of Concerned Scientists recently came out with a report that actually scientifically can identify the effect of certain corporations, Exxon and so on's effect on global warming.
Oh, even, yeah, Monsanto and Bayer and all of these Syngenta
But the
chemical.
issue here is, yes, we see, but the report actually, the research is able to quantify the percentage of their effect
Wow.
on what is occurring. And Of course, no one can say that this particular hurricane or so on is the result of global warming. But, with a place like Harvey in Texas, when the Gulf of Mexico is 7.5 degrees warmer than its average or normal, this creates a devastating effect and the possibility of creating low pressure that allows the storm to develop dramatically. At the same time, the warming of the ice caps affects the jet stream above, which affects the air pressure of the jet stream, which then doesn't have the same force as it comes down across the country from the north to disrupt the storm and allows it to develop more fully and to linger rather than moving it along the highway of these things contribute.
They do contribute, and what's so blatantly obvious is the impact that Exxon and these other oil companies have had on that. The problem I find is that there are all these sanctions in place to protect them. There are all these there's judges and lawyers and laws that prevent them from being. And so that's tough for us to see here, on the outside looking in, that you've got, people going to jail for life for, car theft or minor. Wall Street businessmen in suits and ties get away with putting an entire country in debt or creating really chaos and devastation around the world, and with sort of severance packages. So
well, yeah, so the fact of the matter is that we have to come together and think, and we have to understand that the specious connection between oil companies and chemical companies and pharmaceutical companies to go unregulated because the specious argument that they create jobs, when in fact, for example, with the coal industry, it turns out that the solar industry and the wind industry are creating more jobs and employ more people than the coal industry. And of course, the coal industry contributes a great deal to global warming. The other side of it is there are entrenched factions, there's sunk capital that doesn't want to change and values their own situation above that of larger population. And sometimes the argument is that actually the greater benefit is to stay with oil. But again, that is a specious argument that is bias and benefits a certain few who have sunk their capital in dying or have sunk capital in dying industries that may at one time have been growth. So it's a common, we actually have to understand systems and systems interacting. We have to be able to be more flexible, to be able to actually negotiate and see that it's not just one answer or one way of doing things, that there isn't just this divide, Democrat or Republican. But then the other side of it, on one side, so okay, it looks like there's Democrat and Republican, but then we find out that to some degree, it's servicing the same population and disenfranchising another population, the people that you brought up earlier, underprivileged people. How do we change this? How do we understand the ruthlessness of our unequal distribution of resources, not only in our own country, but what we do to other parts of the world, what our demand for a certain quality, if you will, the stress that puts on
Sub-Saharan Africa.
And so on. Yeah. This has to be factored into our understanding of how we live and how we move into a sustainable future. Sustainable like green, but just sustainable so that people can live. So that we don't have to have a war that relation in order to survive.
So is it reevaluating the judicial system?
Well, I know, I think it's of people realizing, large groups of us coming together and realize the structures and levers of power in our country have been taken over by authority.
So it's putting more power back into the people's hands, like community power over the police, or more.
Well, it could be over the police, but I think it's more, the nature of and okay, it has to do with police. It has to do with the education of our aldermen, the education of the education of congressmen and senators and state assembly people, do with people being with us, assuming each one of us assumes responsibility to think about who will not take care of our best interests, like make sure that we have the best home, but actually take care of our best interests that will actually be able to live in our home, that will act our home, that will actually be able to educate our children in a way that fosters a future and shareable and community-oriented.
So it is creating a power structure that is top down, but it's creating it in sort of a really intellectual people in places of power to make decisions that are very intellectual and smart and have the best interest of the people in mind. Because right now there seems to be an overflow of people that don't have others, but instead for their sort of like, what is it, the term cronyism?
Yeah, well, one of the big fears in the United States, and one certain people fan the flames of, is this sort of fear of educated people. So we all want our children to grow up and, in quotation marks, in quotation marks, our children to grow up and go to Harvard or something in quotation marks. We all want to be educated. But what does educated mean? And why do we not trust them any longer educated? Why is it all of a sudden that someone knows so much as a scientist with regard to global warming that then they become untrustworthy?
Why is that?
I'm not quite sure.
Nor am I.
This again is a media-created social construct that is leveraged and divisive. We can no longer afford to live in a divisive society. But divisive is one pronunciation, like tomato and tomato. But the more we create divides, the overall effort, it puts cracks in the system and people cannot control. So the more cracks and divisions there are, the easier it is for a minority way. It's easier for people to access metadata and use it to influence 1 or 2%, the 1 or 2% of the voters that they need to sway the election, to sway the choice. And there are certain people, wealth and technological awareness, that have accessed data from your Google, our Facebook, our emails, our telephones, so on and so forth, and been able to pay and purchase IT companies that analyze this data on a huge scale and help them devise methods of dividing us. And this is going on all the time. This is a moral and ethical who are coming out of MIT or other technical people need to think about. How is their skill being used and why? Rather than what is the paycheck. Just like the nuclear world. Just like going to work for Raytheon or some other place that's contributing divisiveness and domination.
So distribution of power, distribution of wealth, and...
Well, long ago, in fact, as far back, sometime in the 90s, the wealth and now it's much worse. From my perspective, much worse. From some people's perspective, not worse, better. This is what we want. The wealth was so concentrated in the United States, even in the 90s, that it was more concentrated than in what we called communist, the USSR, and the power of decision making. Meanwhile, we maintain the facade of being a democracy.
Is democracy really good?
Well, I think democracy is good. I think people should participate. Well, you know, most people like to have somebody be decisive and tell them what to do. The problem with democracy is two things: ignorance and lack of responsibility. So, to the degree to which a citizen is ignorant, is the degree to which our democracy has been distorted and turned into what we call an oligarchy and run by a minority who pays no attention to the of the population, for instance, that would like to have universal health care.
Yeah.
Because it serves a few. Can't wrap their head around the fact that reorganizing the healthcare industry and the pharmaceutical industry and redistributing the wealth of it would harm. We look at it more like it would harm the entire population. But that's not the case. Not the case at all. I wouldn't expect it to happen over a year. But, you know, these are things we need to work at incrementally and bring about change. Just, it's not that it's unfair. It's criminal. It holds people's lives hostage for a premium. Am I crazy? That's without, and then we've systematized it and removed it in such a way that there actually is who's benefiting by this standing in front of the other person saying, oh, you don't have the money? Sorry, you're dead.
Yeah.
We devise a system where no one is responsible for outcomes, where no one in a corporate structure is responsible. That we can devastate an economy and we can devastate a world and no one responsible. This, when children see this, when you and I see this, this has an effect on our life that is detrimental. It has what this article calls our psyche.
Mm-hmm. The apathy, yeah.
That turns towards existential malaise, nihilism, aggression, anger, and fear.
Mm-hmm.
Activates all of this at once. Some person comes along and fans those flames and says, this needs to be done. And then we feel like act in that way. We express our anger and we express our destructive force that we are asserting ourselves. But really we're asserting ourselves in the faithlessness. We're weakening ourselves. And this is not healthy. And it's not good. It's not good for society. It's not good for the earth. It's not good for our community. It's not good for Union Square. Where is the wisdom in our leaders?